Welcome everyone to our course on Introduction to the 19th Century British Novel. I'm Dr. Mohammed Al-Wishi, and over the next three sessions we'll embark on a fascinating journey through one of literature's most transformative periods. The 19th century, spanning roughly from 1800 to 1900, represents what many scholars consider the golden age of the novel. This was a time when the novel evolved from a relatively new literary form into the dominant mode of storytelling that continues to shape how we understand narrative today. Think about the novels you read or you have read, or the films you have watched. Many of the storytelling techniques we take for granted: complex character development, psychological depth, social commentary woven into plot. These innovations were pioneered by the Victorian novelists we'll be studying together. This course is offered by the London College of International Studies, and I'm excited to share with you not just the literary itself, but the rich historical context that made these works possible and the analytical tools you will need to appreciate them fully. Course outline: Introduction to the 19th Century British Novel, setting the scene: three, Victorian Britain and the novel, the novel's rise wide the 19th century, major genres in the 19th century novel, key authors and their landmark works, case study: Charles Dickens and social critic, case study: the Pronet sisters and the Gothic elements, themes of growth and development, gender and society in 19th century novels, industrialization and the class conflict, um, narrative techniques in and literary style, a critical approaches to the 19th century novel, developing close reading skills, connecting texts to their contexts. Why study the 19th century British novel? Learning objectives: understand the historical and cultural landscape of the 19th century Britain, including the Victorian era's industrial revolution, social reforms, and cultural anxiety that shaped literary production. Identify and appreciate the contributions of major authors, including Dickens, the Pronets, Eliot, Hardy, and Wilde, understanding their unique voices and lasting influence. Develop sophisticated skills in close reading and literary analysis, learning to identify narrative techniques, symbolism, and thematic patterns within complex texts, analyze recurring themes such as personal growth, social change, morality, class conflict, gender roles, and the tension between traditions and progress that define the century's literature. Explore and distinguish between different novels, genres that flourished during this period. The building Roman coming of age narrative, Gothic fiction, realist novels, and adventure literature. Learning outcomes. The students will be able to discuss how novels reflect Victorian society values, anxieties, and contradictions, understand literature as both minor and a critic of its time, interpret sophisticated narratives techniques, including first-person narration, unreliable narrators, serialization effects, and character development strategies employed by Victorian authors. Connect literary themes to historical events and the social issues such as industrialization, women's rights movements, education reform, and colonial expansion. Critically evaluate texts using external or textual evidence and logical argumentation, supporting interpretations with specific references to language, structure, and context. Present informed nuanced insights of 19th century British literature through written essays, oral presentations, and group discussions that demonstrate deep engagement with the material. Introduction to the 19th century British novel. Welcome to the introduction to the 19th century British novel, the 19th century stretching from the twilight of the Romantic Age into the highly influential Victorian era, were the novel's undisputed a golden age, transforming the genre into the dominant literary form we recognize today. Consider in 1700, novels barely existed. By 1900, they had eclipsed poetry and drama as the most popular, most influential, and the most culturally significant literary forms. What happened? Why did this transformation occur, especially in the 19th century? These are questions we'll explore throughout the course. This wasn't just quantitative growth, it was qualitative transformation. Victorian novelists didn't just write more novels, they fundamentally changed what novels could do. They developed techniques for psychological depth, created complex plot structures, experimented with narrative voices, and addressed contemporary social issues with unprecedented directness. This course offers a comprehensive survey from approximately 1800 to 1900. We'll explore how writers like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, George Eliot, and Thomas Hardy captured and critiqued an era defined by radical change. Britain was transforming from an agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse, from a rural nation into an urban one, from traditional hierarchies into more fluid social structures. The novel was perfectly suited to exploring these transformations. We will investigate the formal innovations of the novel, how authors experimented with narrative voice, complex plotting, and the psychological realism. These weren't just stylistic choices, they were responses to the profound socio-economic and cultural shifts of the time. The novel's flexibility allowed it to address contemporary concerns while entertaining diverse audiences. This course offers a comprehensive survey of the British novel from approximately 1800 to 1900. We will explore how writers like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, George Eliot, and Thomas Hardy captured and critiqued an era defined by radical change. We will investigate the formal innovations of the novel, examining how authors experimented with narrative voice, complex plotting, and psychological realism to address the profound socio-economic and cultural shifts of the time. The image you see, a stack of beautiful classical bound volumes, represents the psychological, the physical form in which many Victorians encountered the novels. These weren't disposable paperbacks. Novels were substantial objects, often published first in expensive 3-volume editions, then in cheaper single volumes, and frequently serialized in magazines. The material form influenced how novels were written and read. Understanding the novel means understanding not just the text but the entire cultural apparatus, authors, publishers, readers, librarians, critics that made Victorian fiction such a power force in shaping public consciousness. Student the scene 3, Victorian Britain and the novel. Victorian era 1857 to 1901 represents one of the history's most dynamic periods of transformation. Britain evolved from a primary agriculture rural society into the world's leading industrial power, fundamentally reshaping every aspect of daily life, social status, and the cultural production. This radical transformation provided fertile ground for the novel's emergence as the dominant literary form. Why? Because the novel is particularly well suited to exploring social change, depicting diverse characters from different classes, examining moral questions without easy answers, and representing the complexity of modern life. The novel became the form through which Victorians made sense of their radically changing world. It offered narratives of individual development in times of social flux. It provided social critique while entertaining. It created imaginative spaces where readers could explore questions and anxieties they faced in their own life own lives. Understanding this context is crucial. Victorian novels are timeless, universal stories that somehow exist outside history that is deeply embedded in specific historical circumstances. The more we understand those circumstances, the richer our reading becomes. Context doesn't determine meaning, but it opens interpretive possibilities. The Great Exception of 1851, housed in the magnificent Crystal Palace, stood as a powerful symbol of British progress and technological supremacy. This celebration of innovation reflected the era's optimism about human advancement, yet also masked underlying social tensions that novelists would explore with increasing sophistication. While Britain celebrated industrial achievement, what about the workers laboring in dangerous factories while the exhibition displayed imperial positions? What about the colonized peoples while the middle classes enjoyed unprecedented prosperity? What about the European poor living in desperate conditions? Victorian society was full of these contradictions. It proclaimed Christian um, clarity while sometimes treating the power with cruelty. It celebrated family values while maintaining rigid gender hierarchies. It praised individual merits while maintaining class barriers. It promoted freedom while ruling a vast empire. Novelists became expert at exposing these contradictions, not always through direct criticism, but often through their plots, characters, and the symbolic structures. The gap between Victorian ideals and Victorian realities created rich material for fiction. Urbanization accelerated dramatically as people migrated from rural areas to burgeoning industrial cities. This demographic shift created new social dynamics, bringing different classes into unprecedented proximity and generating anxieties about social order, morality, and identity that pervade Victorian fiction. How should classes relate to each other? What obligations did the wealthy owe the poor? Could social order be maintained when traditional structures were breaking down? How did individuals maintain moral character in the anonymous urban environment? Victorian novels are obsessed with the city. Think of Dickens' London, teeming, diverse, exciting, dangerous. Cities appear as spaces of opportunity and threat, liberation and corruption, connection and alienation. European settings allowed novelists to bring diverse characters together in ways rural settings couldn't. City became a character itself in many novels, complex, contradictory force shaping individual lives. Novels helped Victorian make sense of urban experiences. They mapped cities both geographically and socially. They explored what it meant to live among strangers. They examined how urban environments influenced character and morality. In many ways, the Victorian novel is the urban novel. Middle class expansion, brand cultural revolution, literary influence. The rise of a substantial middle class created a new readership hungry for literature. These readers sought narratives that reflect their values, aspirations, and anxieties about maintaining respectability and achieving upward mobility. Brand structure revolution. Technological advances in printing combined with rising literacy rates and circulating libraries democratized access to literature. Serialization in magazines made novels affordable and accessible to unprecedented numbers of readers. Literary influence, the social and technological changes profoundly influenced novel writing, encouraging authors to address contemporary issues while developing new narrative techniques suited to serialized publication and diverse audiences. Novels became forums for public debate, spaces where social questions could be explored imaginatively. The novel's rise, why the 19th century? The 19th century witnessed the novel's triumphant ascendance to become the dominant literary form, eclipsing poetry and drama in both popularity and cultural influence. The shift reflected profound changes in society, technology, and consciousness that made the novel uniquely suited to capturing the era's complexities. Consider what the novel offered that other forms didn't. Poetry had traditionally been the most prestigious literary form, but poetry often dealt with heightened emotions, idealized situations, and formal constraints. Drama required critical production and reached limited audiences. The novel, by contrast, could address contemporary life directly, develop characters over hundreds of pages, explore social problems in details, and reach readers privately in their homes. The novelist or the novel's flexibility was crucial. It could be serious or comic, realist or gothic, focused on individual psychology or social panoramas. It could incorporate multiple plots, diverse characters, and varied settings. This flexibility allowed novelists to respond to their rapidly changing worlds in ways other forms couldn't match. The shift also reflected the changing patterns of literary and leisure. More people could read, more people had leisure time for extended reading. The novel's length, which might seem like a disadvantage, actually suited middle-class readers who wanted substantial environment and instruction. Understanding why the novel rose to prominence helps us understand not just literary history, but larger cultural transformation. The dominance of the novel reflects modernity itself, the rise of print culture, individualism, psychological territory, and the belief that ordinary life deserves serious artistic attention. The era of personal development. Victorian audiences demonstrated particular fascination with narratives about personal growth and social mobility. The building strawman of novel formation. These stories resonated deeply with a society experiencing unprecedented social fluidity, where individual effort and moral character could theoretically lead to advancement. The popularity of such narratives connected directly to contemporary self-improvement culture. Samuel Smiles' enormously influential self-help 1859 articulated Victorian beliefs in individual agency, perseverance, and moral development themes that novelists explored with greater nuance and psychological depth. Then conducts booklet. They showed developments, complexity, the causes of ambition, the conflicts between personal desires and the social expectations, the role of luck and circumstances alongside effort. They questioned whether individual merit alone could overcome social barriers. Literary accessibility. Unlike earlier literary forms requiring classical education or aristocratic leisure, the novel was democratic and accessible. Its prose format contemporary settings and the focus on recognizable human experiences invited broad readership across class boundaries. The novel's length and episodic structure suited serialized publication in magazines, making literature affordable through installments. This format created reading communities that discussed each installment, making literature a shared social experience rather than solitary pursuit. Circulating libraries further democratized access for an annual description. Members could borrow as many books as they wanted. This meant middle-class families could read extensively without purchasing books. Libraries shaped what got published, knowing novels could be purchased by libraries, influenced publishers' decisions. The novel also suited private reading in ways drama couldn't. You didn't need to attend theater at a specific time. You could read at home at your own space, at your own pace, fitting reading around work and family obligations. This suited middle-class domestic ideologies that valued home-centered leisure. This accessibility had profound implications. Literature shaped the public opinion across class boundaries. Novels created shared cultural differences. They influenced how people thought about social issues. The novel became a democratic art form in an era increasingly concerned with democracy. Cultural impacts. The 19th century novel didn't merely reflect society it actively shaped the public consciousness, influenced social reforms, and created shared culture touchstones that transcend class divisions. This is really important to understand. We sometimes think of literature as just entertainment or as secondary to real historical forces like economics or politics. But Victorian novels were themselves historical forces. They shaped how people thought about poverty, gender roles, education, class relations, and countless other issues. Consider Dickens' influence on social reforms. His novels exposing workhouse conditions, child labor, and urban poverty didn't just reflect these problems. They mobilized the public opinions, addressed them. Politicians read Dickens' reformers cited his novels, his depiction of social problem created empathy and the agency that dry reports couldn't match. Or consider how novels shaped gender consciousness. When readers encountered Jane Eyre's Declaration of Equality with Rochester or followed Dorothea Brooks' intellectual frustration in Middlemarch, they were presented with challenges to conventional gender ideologies. These fictional examples gave readers frameworks for thinking about women's rights and roles. Novels created shared cultural touchstones. Characters like Oliver Twist, Jane Eyre, and Mr. Macabre became culture's reference points. People across class knew these characters and used them to discuss social issues. When someone mentioned Scrooge, everyone understood the reference and its implications about greed and redemption. This cultural influence worked across class divisions in ways few other institutions could. The wealthy and the poor might not attend the same churches or schools, might not work in the same places or live in the same neighborhoods, but they read the same novels. They read the same novels. This created a shared imaginative culture that was crucial to maintaining social cohesion despite profound inequalities. The novel's cultural impact extended beyond Britain through translation and imperial circulation. Victorian novels shaped global understandings on modernity, industrialization, and social change. Major genres in the 19th century novel. The 19th century literary richness manifested in diverse novel genres, each serving distinct purposes and appealing to different aspects of Victorian consciousness. Understanding these genres provides essential frameworks for analyzing individual works and recognizing how authors innovated within established conventions. The 19th century literary richness manifested in diverse novel genres, each serving distinct purposes and appealing to different aspects of Victorian consciousness. These weren't rigid categories. Many novels combined elements from multiple genres but they represent recognizable patterns that authors and readers understood. Why does genre matter? Because genre created expectations and conventions. When readers encountered a Gothic novel, they anticipated certain elements, mysterious settings, supernatural settings, psychological intensity. When they read Buildings from, they expected a journey from youth to maturity with the moral and the social dimensions. Authors could um, fulfill these expectations, subvert them, or combine them in innovative ways. Genre also reflects cultural needs and anxieties. The popularity of particular genres at particular times tells us something about what readers wanted and needed from fiction. The prominence of social problems novels in the 1840s and 1850s reflects concerns about industrial conditions. The Gothic revival in the late Victorian period reflects anxieties about the causes of progress and the persistence of irrationality. We will examine four major genres: the Bildungs Roman of novel of formation, Gothic fiction, the realist novel, and adventure and the mystery fiction. Each genre had distinctive characteristics, but the most interesting novels often blended genres. Building room might incorporate Gothic elements, or a realist novel might include adventure plot lines. Understanding genre enriches interpretation. When you recognize that Jane Eyre combines Buildings room with Gothic romance, you can analyze how these genres interact. When you see how Dickens adapts this room conventions in Great Expectations, you appreciate his innovations. Let's explore each major genre in detail. Bul Build on Gershman. The novel of formation or development traces a protagonist's journey from youth to maturity, focusing on psychological, moral, and social growth. This genre captured Victorian preoccupation with self-improvement and the character formation. Gothic novel, Gothic fiction employed mystery, horror, supernatural elements, and atmospheric settings to explore psychological depth and social anxieties. These novels often questioned rationalism and revealed darker aspects of human nature. And society that realism couldn't easily address. The Gothic questioned Enlightenment rationalism by suggesting that reason couldn't explain or control everything. It explored repressed desires and fears. It examined how the past haunts the present. Classic Gothic novels include Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Adolfo, but Gothic elements appear throughout Victorian fiction in the Province novels, in Darkener and Dickens' psychological intensity and sensation fiction. Gothic fiction revealed anxieties about sexuality, gender, class, and empire that politic society preferred not to discuss directly. The supernatural became a language for exploring what couldn't be said explicitly. Realist novel. Realist fiction emphasizes details, social observation, psychological complexity, and critique of contemporary society. These novels aim to represent life truthfully, often exposing social problems and advocating reform. Adventure, mystery, adventure novels featuring exploration, colonial settings, and the mystery reflected Britain imperial expansion and readers' fascination with exotic locals. These narratives often reinforced or questioned imperial ideologies. Showing British characters bringing civilization to supposedly savage places, depicting colonial subjects as inferior or threatening, justifying imperial rule as beneficial. But adventure fiction wasn't simply propaganda, it also expressed anxieties about empire fears that contact with colonial subjects might corrupt British character, concerns about the causes of imperial expansion, questions about whether British values could survive in foreign environments. Mystery fiction developed late in the Victorian periods with authors like Wilkie Collins creating sensation novels that combined mystery, suspense, and social critique. Detective fiction emerged with figures like Sherlock Holmes, offering reassurance that rational investigation could solve problems and restore order in an era of rapid change and social complexity. Mystery fiction suggested problems could be solved through systematic investigation. Adventure fiction offered the imaginative escape while also reflecting imperial realities. Key authors and their landmark works. The 19th century produced an extraordinary constellation of literary talent whose works continue to captivate readers and influence writers today. These authors didn't merely entertain they shaped the public discourse, influenced social norm, and created enduring characters that embody. It's worth pausing to appreciate how remarkable this period was. Think about this list of authors: Austen, Dickens, and Florence Eliot, Hardy, Wilde, Collins, and many others. This concentration of genuine in a single century, in a single nation, is extraordinary. These weren't isolated artists working independently. They knew each other, read each other's work, influenced each other, and engaged in literary debates about the novel's purpose and techniques. They published in the same magazines, worked with the same publishers, and completed for the same readers. They also responded to the same historical forces we've discussed: industrialization, urbanization, social reform, movements, imperial expansion. Their novels reflected these forces in different ways, offering various perspectives on Victorian society. Understanding major authors means understanding not just individual works, but literary traditions and dialogues. When George Eliot wrote, she was aware of Dickens' achievements and and chose different approaches. When Hardy wrote later in the century, he was responding to what earlier novelists had accomplished. We will focus particularly on a few figures who represent important strengths and achievements. This doesn't mean others are less important. It means where selecting representative figures who help us understand the period's diversity and richness. Charles Dickens, the Bronx, George Eliot. Let's start with the major works: Oliver Twist, 1858, David Copperfield, 1850, Great Expectations, 1861. Master of social critique and memorable characters, Dickens exposed Victorian society injustice through vivid storytelling and emotional power. The Bronx sister, Charlotte Jane Eyre, 1847, revolutionary portrayal of female independence and passion. Emily, Wuthering Heights, 1847, dark, intense exploration of destructive passion. And the tenant of Phil Hole, 1848. George, 1819 to 1880, Middlemarch, 1871 to 1872, in what we say provincial settings. Thomas Hardy, notable work consists of Your Privilege, 1891. Hardy's novels explore faith, social determinism, and rural lives, transformation, often challenging Victorian moral conventions with tragic narratives. Oscar Wilde's notable work, The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1891. Wilde's only novel combines Gothic elements with philosophical exploration of aestheticism, morality, and the nature of art and corruption. Wilde was the leading figure in the aesthetic movement, which proclaimed art for art's sake, the idea that artist's value lies in beauty rather than moral instruction. This directly challenged Victorian assumptions that art should have moral purpose. The picture of Dorian Gray explores these questions through its central symbols, a portrait that ages while Dorian remains beautiful, making his moral corruption visible. The novel examines the relationship between appearances and reality, between beauty and morality, between art and life. Whilst brilliance shines through his wit, the novel is filled with paradoxes and epigrams that sparkle with intelligence while undermining conventional pieties, while it challenges Victorian moralism, while also showing the dangers of pure asceticism divorced from ethics, both hardy and wild in different ways, respecting the challenges to mid-Victorian certainties. They wrote at a time when Victorian values were being questioned, when new ideas about morality, art, and society were emerging. Their works look forward to modernism while remaining rooted in Victorian traditions. Case study: Charles Dickens and social critics. Charles Dickens stands as Victorian literature's most influential social critic, wielding the narrative power to expose justice and advocate reform. His novels transcended entertainment to become powerful instruments of social consciousness, reaching audiences across class boundaries and generating public discourse about pressing social issues. Dickens possessed an extraordinary ability to blend memorable characters, compelling plots, and fitting social commentary. His childhood experiences, including his father's imprisonment for debt and his own work in a blacking factory, provided intimate knowledge of poverty, realities that infused his fiction with authenticity and emotional urgency. That privileged authors couldn't match. Third, his genius for characterization. Dickens didn't create abstractions of types, he created vivid individuals who embodied social issues. When readers met Albert West or Little Dorrit or Joe the Crossing Sweep, they weren't just learning about social problems, they were emotionally connecting with suffering individuals. Dickens understood that changing society required changing hearts, not just minds. His novels creating empathy and urgency that dry social reports couldn't generate. Let's examine one novel in detail to see how this works. Child labor exposure. The novel vividly portrayed child exploitation in workhouses and on streets, drawing attention to society's failure to protecting its most vulnerable members and challenging the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834. Workhouse conditions. Dickens' satirical depiction of workhouse administrators and brutal conditions sparked public outrage. The famous scene where Oliver asks for more food became iconic, symbolizing institutional cruelty and human dignity's persistence. The scene works so brilliantly because of what it implies. Children are so hungry, they draw lots to see who will risk asks for more meaning. They're becoming systematically starved when Oliver makes this simple, reasonable request: more food for a hungry child. He's treated as a criminal. The Biddle is outraged. The board is scandalized. Oliver is plugged up as dangerous. This exposes the system's inhumanity. The people's administrating the workhouse are fat and comfortable with while children starve. They claim moral superiority while treating children cruelly. Dickens' satire devastates them. Third, memorable characters like the artful Dodger, Fagin, and Bill Sykes weren't mere villains but complex products of social circumstances. This promoted readers to consider environmental factors in criminality and moral development. Dickens doesn't excuse crime, but he shows how poverty and lack of opportunity publish people to where that Fagin is a criminal, but he's also providing survival to boys who have no other options. The Artful Dodger is a thief, but he is also a victim of abandonment and exploitation. Fourth, realize the impact published in monthly installments. The novel kept social issues before the public eye consistently, building suspense while allowing readers time to reflect on the moral and the social questions between episodes. This format was crucial to Dickens' impact. Each installment raised questions and left readers eager for more. Between installments, readers discussed what they had read, debated the issues, and anticipated the next development. The extended publication period meant social issues stayed in public consciousness for months. Finally, Dickens' legacy. His work has contributed directly to social reforms, including improvements in education, sanitation, and the treatment of the poor. He demonstrated literature's power to effect social change. Reformers cited his novels in advocating for change. Politicians acknowledged his influence. This doesn't mean Dickens single-handed reformed Victorian society. Social change resulted from many factories, but Dickens mobilized public opinion, created empathy, and made social problems impossible to ignore. That's the power of literature. We will stop here and we'll continue, inshallah, next time talking about the introduction to the 19th century novel. Until next time, ta-ta for now.